I started this conversation about a problem to solve, which is internships, which we know changes lives, which is awesome. And that was a terrific conversation with Robert Smith. And we think of... Oh, and Sandy. You haven't passed that torch quite yet. But partnerships aren't just about companies. I mean, companies are important, without question. But it's also about whether or not, as a nonprofit or a school, you're willing to partner with others in your space. Not compete, partner, collaborate, scale together, take what each does well and put it together to do better for more. So please welcome Diane Travener, who is the actually CEO of Summit Schools. Come on in, Diane.
Morning.
Welcome to the living room of NAF.
Thank you.
So as Sandy, does what he does, which he connects people, and Sandy has always thought about doing more for more by partnering versus competing. And so based on connections all over the place, started talking to what Diane has been spending much of her life doing, starting as a teacher, moving through a public structure in California, being tapped to lead a charter school structure, how to get out of some of the bureaucracies and do what's good for kids, demonstrate with high accountability that there are a variety of models within choice that work, that's in the public sector, but then she can only run so many schools. At some point, she has to have a design that partners with public education across the country to scale to thousands. So Diane, give us just like a 5-minute overview of Summit. Sandy and I and anyone in this room would be so impressed with what you have pulled off and what you've done. So the opportunity to think about partnering with you to do more for many is really something that's very close to our heart.
But let's not talk about thousands, let's talk about millions.
Okay. Yes,
Okay.
there we go.
He tells me that every time we talk. It's so humbling and inspiring to be here with all of you and all of you. And like Robert, this feels very homey to me. My mom was had a preschool in our house, so this is very similar to my living room as well, where we were all about education. So Summit Public Schools is a few different things. For starters, it's a public charter school network of schools in California and Washington State. Started in 2003 and really founded with the mission of how do we prepare an intentionally diverse student population for success in college, career, and life, and to be contributing members of society. Which sounds pretty basic and kind of boring, but the reality is, like we've talked about, it's not what is happening for the most part. And so we started as these community-based schools with this mission and found ourselves about 10 years in having achieved a pretty high degree of success. Pretty large demand for our schools. We sent 100% of our graduates were accepted to a 4-year college and went on to 4-year college. And by all accounts, we were doing great. And people kept saying, grow, 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 make more schools. And then 4 years into college for our first graduating class, we got our results back, and about 55% of our students had earned a 4-year degree. And it was an interesting moment at time because a lot of people looked at me and said, oh my gosh, that's double the national average. Go, go, keep going, build more. And those of us at Summit said, it's half. We didn't get into this for 55%. We got into it for 100%. And to Robert's point, we cannot be focused on a small subset of students. We have to be focused on every single individual student. And we have a strong model of mentoring and always have. And so I knew these kids. And I knew that they wanted to finish. And so what was the issue? And so this is about 5 years ago. And that question launched us on a journey that we're still on today to answer that question. What does it take to reach every single individual student and ensure that they really can ultimately be ready for the good life, the life that they want to lead, that every one of us has the right to lead? And that led us to, through a lot of iteration and innovation and testing and trying and failures, develop a new definition of success for students, a much broader definition. You all have been talking about really the elements of this morning. There's 4 pieces to it. One is that, yes, students still need knowledge that our system has really been based on. You need to know stuff in order to be successful. But perhaps more importantly, you need a whole set of skills, and really 2 types of skills. One, we call them the cognitive skills, so the ability to analyze and evaluate and communicate effectively, these cross-cutting skills, but also those that we call the habits of success, and you all were talking about these earlier, the ability to work in teams and collaborate and have interpersonal relationships to manage our time and all those things that make us successful, persevere, the idea that you would call HR every day for 2 weeks and then every Monday thereafter, those types of skills. And then finally, a sense of purpose, and purpose really comes from the ability to discover, to experiment, to be exposed to a whole variety of interests, to be able to figure out what you like and don't like, to understand what you value and care about, and then ultimately to bring those things together in figuring out what pathway you might want for your future. And then we believe when you leave high school to have that next credible step planned on that pathway. And so that's really the new definition of success. And so what kind of school do you need in order to help every single student reach that definition? And we really think there are 3 pillars. The first is an approach to learning that is very project-based, that's very hands-on, that's very authentic. And so our students in grades 6 through 12 will do 200 projects with real performance tasks before they graduate from our schools. The second is to become a self-directed learner, and Robert really spoke to this when he said, this idea that he was put into his internship and he had the library and he had people to ask questions of, that skill set where someone can drive their own learning. It turns out every single student, every single person is capable of that, but you have to build that skill, you have to build that muscle, you have to practice it, you have to have coaching in it. And then third, and so important related to your work, is mentoring. Yeah. And so every single one of our students has a mentor who stays with them for 4, 5, 6, 7 years and really guides them and builds a relationship and knows them. And so those pieces really make up what Summit Learning has become. And because we are located in Silicon Valley, we really are of the valley in a lot of ways, and realize that you need technology in order to give teachers the tools they need to create these types of environments. Right. And we were tinkering around a few years ago. I was really proud of myself. We had managed to hire a single engineer who had sort of put together this initial platform. We started with a bunch of Google spreadsheets and whatnot, but we got an actual platform and had a bunch of people visiting and saying, we'd really like to do what you're doing. And we are very open source and wanted to share, but it's hard. Those of you who've tried to share, emailing around PDFs of your lesson plans is not really terribly practical. But we are where we are, and so one day, Mark Zuckerberg came to visit, and he looked around our school and said, wow, I wish I could have gone to a school like this. Wow, what do you need to be able to share this with others? Because after 15 years, I have 11 schools serving 3,000 kids. 15 years and a lot of gray hair.
Please, let's not go there.
And I said, we can't share this. Our technology, we're barely holding it together for our own schools. And he said, well, I have a bunch of engineers. Would that be helpful? We said yes. And so a few years ago, we partnered with Facebook to actually create what I call the industrial grade platform. They don't call it that. It's not cool to call it that. But I call it that. And so this fall, our 3rd year in now, working with schools across the country, we'll be working with about 350 schools in 40 states. We are offering, through the Summit Learning program, the platform for free The curriculum and assessment, we have built grades 6 through 12 in 5 subject areas for free. Training, as you know, JD, I'm about to set off on a multi-city tour where
Yes.
we're training all summer long. And then ongoing support throughout the year, data and analytics, as well as coaching by teachers and school leaders who've been working in this model. And so, you know, that is where we started connecting, and hopefully you've heard in this story all the synergy that we have in our approach, why I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, we're just, I mean, it's the matchmaking that Sandy, I think, has demonstrated for 37 years about finding best practices, partnering them, and elevating each with the other. And for this audience, so much of what you've done is anchored in what we believe. Personalized learning, project-based, hands-on, inspirational based to the individual learner. And I think you've doubled down on what it takes to graduate from high school on the core academics, and you've doubled down on that because you have to. And we have been more on the sidetrack of a career technical, reinforcing a set of skills on the work side of the picture, not blended, integrated with core academics, but that's left up right to the schools. So this opportunity of imagining, taking all the great work and the platform. So for this audience, you know we get to look at how great you are once a year at the end of your assessment, right? Your academy assessment, how are you doing? Where do you need help? Imagine they've built a platform where it's real time. So she sees in her schools where things are not quite as good as they might be and can deploy resources to them. I mean, imagine as an administrator in this room, you being able to see that in your schools and deploy things on time when needed, not all at once. So it's a great opportunity, and Sandy, you should tell us what you saw when you saw the two of us together and you said, okay, we got to do something.
All right, well, let me just tell you how it started. Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Priscilla, decided to make a $3 billion grant in basic sciences on the campus of UCSF, consolidating people from Stanford, UCSF, and Berkeley to work together. And I had never witnessed a $3 billion gift before, nor had my wife, so we decided to fly out and see what something like that was like. And we went out there and listened to Mark and Priscilla talk, and he's talking about curing all diseases or having them contained by the end of the century. Well, I've never thought so big, and but I've always never been afraid of change, and I've always thought of change as an opportunity rather than something to be feared of. So at the end of that celebration, I went and introduced myself to Mark Zuckerberg and started talking, I know, of his interest in education, and especially his wife's interest and dedication in education. And I started talking to him about our high school program, which was, you have 11 schools, and we're in we have 750 academies, and have dealt with a lot of different school boards and have developed courses, but we haven't digitized a lot of what we do yet, and we haven't. I never thought of personalized education, and not having to embarrass somebody that goes at this rate because you want to motivate the person at that rate. This way you can motivate everybody, which I think was really terrific. And I was thinking about NAF when we're thinking about a 5-year plan of growing from 100,000 students over the next 5 years to 125,000 students and having a better quality product than we have today. I listened to the Zuckerbergs, and all of a sudden I start thinking about, well, we can have 1 million students. Why not? If we just, had the resources and the intellect to really think about how do we digitize and how do we change a method of education to work with all the students so that nobody is really left behind and nobody is held back from what their potential is. And so I met with Mark one afternoon, and I mentioned the word million, and he, I think for a second, says, let's do it a little slower than that. Let's see how this thing goes, and then we'll figure it out. And just to show you how real life this was, at about 7:15, he said to me that, well, this is a great conversation, but I really got to go home now. This is Wednesday, and it's my turn to bathe the baby. And I hadn't heard that in 50 years. So I think that you guys have changed my life, and I had the opportunity to go and meet students in several grades of your school in Redwood City, and to watch all of them motivated and how they did the things as teams, and everybody had their computer, and they're dreaming big. And it's really an obligation, I think, that we have, NAF has, you have, we all have together to collaborate and work with the people that really make up America today. And when you think about the engineers in the United States, and why is the technology industry going to get picked on like the financial industry did, with such a big difference between what a worker makes and what the top people make? Well, the engineers, about 12% of the engineering population in the United States is women, and less than 4% of the engineering population comes from the Hispanic and African American communities. Well, that is not good, because those three categories, women, African Americans, and Hispanic, make up about 75% of our population. And we are not educating people to where the opportunities are. And it's so obvious what we have to do. But we have to not be afraid of change. We have to think of collaborations. We have to think about partnerships. This is not just about NAF. It's not just about this product. It's how do you utilize it. I was reading something in the paper this morning on CRISPR-Cas9, where they're finally talking about making this science available to everybody, because that's what can really help develop new solutions to lots of the problems that we have, rather than people fighting about who has the patent and I'm going to keep this all to myself. So God bless you for what you do, and for you being you.
So just, we've come to the end of our living room get-together, but just we've kind of built a tradition now for 4 years. We like to reveal something in the first segment of our conference. And I guess the reveal this year is the partnership that we are testing between Summit and NAF is really around taking a few of our industry-vetted courses, which many of you use and know, and how does it sit? How could it sit in a platform that is driven at a personal level? So not by teacher on a stage, but individual students driving their own personal learning. Does our content naturally fit and blend with the core academics in a way that could scale rapidly? So we're going to do some pilot testing together. We already are in a couple of communities where we both sit already, where the community, the school has selected NAF, and they've selected Basecamp, the platform that Summit has built. So without us asking them to, they already independently went, oh, I'm going to take that, and I'm going to take that, and I'm going to make my district better. So trying to build on places that organically already selected two strategies to work locally. We've got some natural places to test how this could work in order to ask the question, if we partnered, could we, is it possible to imagine that all that you bring to your students and all that Diane and Summit brings to their students could be brought to millions with less capacity issues, which all of us face. So the reveal to you is we're in a test mode. And I think it requires a couple of things. One, it needs to make sense, which I think it does. Secondly, you need to actually respect each other, which I think we do. And thirdly, you actually need to believe in what you're doing, and everybody on this stage is all in. So I hope you are. Thank you all.
Let me just add one thing to what JD says. If we're going to really make a difference in education, I think we have to do it with the public school system. Somebody can open one charter school, 10 charter schools, but you're never going to reach all the people.
Never going to do it.
And we started NAF in partnership with the head of the Board of Education in New York City and the head of the man that at that time ran the teachers union, and encouraged the teachers to take summer externships and really get involved in a new kind of learning, and develop courses that we wrote in combination with the private sector and teachers, and teach the subjects that are forward-looking rather than what was here 100 years ago.
Right.
Definitely.
And that's what we are doing, and hopefully together we can really reach millions and make a difference. And thank you for really, you're all coming here.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.